Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. The British government has ordered a probe into foreign financial interference in politics as the government cited the case of former senior member of Reform UK, who was jailed for taking bribe of $53,732 to promote Russian interests in the European Parliament. European leaders have signed the convention and has launched a Hague-based international claims commission to assess Ukraine's claims over Russia and Ukraine war, with more than 86,000 claims filed and the World Bank estimating $524 billion needed for reconstruction. The host broadcaster of the next Eurovision Song Contest, Austria's ORF, has said that it will not ban the Palestinian flag from the audience or drown out booing during Israel's performance. The 70th edition of the contest in May will have 35 entries, the smallest number of participants since 2003, amid boycott over Israel's participation. Italy's ruling parties are urging caution in the use of frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine, according to a draft parliamentary resolution saying the impact on state finances should be carefully assessed. This comes as the EU assesses using the frozen Russian assets to back a loan for Kyiv's military and civilian needs. Philippine immigration says the father and son behind Australia's deadly Bondi Beach attack spent most of November in the country. Officials say the father entered the Philippines as an Indian national before returning to Australia. Thailand says Cambodia must be the first to announce a ceasefire to halt more than a week of deadly border clashes. Bangkok says Cambodia, which it calls the aggressor, must also cooperate sincerely in border demining efforts. Myanmar junta said that detained former leader Aung San Suu Kyi is in good health despite her serving a 27-year prison sentence. Kyi, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, was detained after a 2021 military coup that ousted her elected civilian government and sparked a civil war. According to astronomy reports, interstellar comet 3I Atlas will make its closest approach to Earth on December 19th this year, giving a final and best chance for ground-based observatories to study the rare object before it leaves the solar system forever. Now we start with US. The United States has designated Colombia's Clan del Golfo crime gang, currently the country's largest illegal armed group, as a terrorist organization. President Donald Trump's administration has been designating criminal groups in Latin America as terrorist organizations, raising the costs for those who provide support for the groups, which Washington says are responsible for moving drugs and migrants into the United States. Previously, former U.S. President Joe Biden's administration last year sanctioned top leaders of the Clan del Golfo, which in recent years began to refer to itself as the Gaitanist Army of Colombia. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has called the group a violent and powerful criminal organization whose main source of income is cocaine trafficking and is responsible for terrorist attacks in Colombia. The Clan del Golfo group and the government of Colombia's leftist president Gustavo Petro are currently holding talks in Qatar, part of Petro's embattled plan to bring peace to the country after 6 decades of armed conflict. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Matthew Vadum. He's an American journalist and author, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Vadum, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, what more can you tell us about this situation?
About the designation of the Clan of the Gulf?
Yes.
That's the English name for Clan del Golfo. Well, it's an anti-communist terrorist group in Colombia that is probably the biggest drug cartel that they have there right now. I think they specialize in cocaine, and the United States government views them as a problem. So President Trump designated them as a terrorist group. The president of Colombia, President Petro, himself is a former terrorist, albeit a left-wing terrorist. The Klan is an anti-communist terrorist group, and they've been attempting to negotiate a settlement in which the Klan would stand down. I don't know if that's going to happen, but the United States views it, as a problem, and it's designating it as a terrorist organization so that it can take action against its members, and so that people who cooperate with the terrorist organization can be investigated and punished.
So do you think that designating Clan del Golfo as a terrorist organization changes the legal, financial, and diplomatic tools available for Washington to in combating this Clan del Golfo?
Well, it definitely makes relations between the United States and Colombia, which in recent years have been fairly tense since President Petro, ex-communist terrorist, took over the country. So, it makes it puts more pressure on Colombia, and President Trump has shown that he's very willing to use force against drug traffickers in the Caribbean and in the northern part of South America. So I would think that Colombia is actually probably quite worried about this designation, because President Trump has also, where there have been drug cartels that have been operating with impunity, President Trump has threatened to invade in order to stamp them out. He's threatened to do it with Mexico, though I don't think he's done it, but Mexico is quite offended by the suggestion, and President Trump has directed the U.S. military to blow up allegedly drug-running boats off the coast of South America, and is very committed to his to escalating the war on drugs, because he argues that if he doesn't do that, that Americans are going to die as a result of getting contaminated drugs such as fentanyl, which seems to find its way into many illegal substances nowadays that people take recreationally.
And do you think this could be, like, we know that through 2 Venezuelan boats there has been continuous attacks, but how many attacks can continue to kind of stop the illegal drug trafficking? What do you think is the long-term solution?
Well, the long-term solution is probably to get people to stop taking drugs. So, because it's the demand for, excuse me, I have a cold. It's the demand for drugs which keeps the illegal drug market alive. Short of that, there'd have to be more cooperation between the U.S. and Colombia and the countries that have these drug cartels, in an effort to crack down on them, in an effort to stamp them out. Though these drug wars are never ending, and I doubt that they ever will end unless people stop having an interest in buying the product that the drug cartel is selling.
Right.
The people have been taking drugs for a long time. It's hard to get them to stop, but if you raise the costs to them of doing drugs, then you can reduce illegal drug consumption for sure.
Yeah, in Canada, since weed was like that, and then they decriminalized weed and it became legal, do you think that could, or something like that could happen with fentanyl, or do you think that would not in US?
With fentanyl, I doubt that the fentanyl would be, decriminalized. It's an extremely dangerous drug that, even a very small quantity of it can kill you. And so, people have been. I don't know that too many people sit around and say, let's have some fentanyl, given its reputation for lethality.
Yes.
But making it legal, that doesn't. I'm not sure how that would solve. I'm not sure how that would solve the problem, because, it gets. The problem is you get people in the drug trade mix it with other drugs, and
Yes.
so the consumer doesn't even know that he's using it. So I'm not sure how decriminalizing fentanyl would solve the problem.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Vadam for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for another discussion as well. Now, moving on to Europe, European leaders have agreed to set up an international body to assess reparations for Ukraine over Russia's invasion, launching the International Claims Commission for Ukraine at a meeting in The Hague. Backed by 35 countries, the Commission will review claims for damage and losses caused since Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022 and determine compensation on a case-by-case basis. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that accountability for war crimes is essential to achieving peace. While the Commission will validate claims, officials said payments are not guaranteed and could involve frozen Russian assets in the future. The World Bank estimates Ukraine's reconstruction costs at more than $500 billion.
We expect that every mechanism for compensation, from the Register of Damage and Claims Commission to the actual payments, will start working and receive strong and sufficient international support, so that people can truly feel that any kind of damage caused by the war can be compensated. This war and Russia's responsibility for it must become a clear example, so that others learn not to choose aggression. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Matti Zweig. He's a geopolitical expert, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Matti, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, to what extent can mechanisms for accountability and reparations, how do you think that can contribute to a durable peace in Ukraine?
This is a hard question, because we are not talking here about a durable peace. We are talking here about the European countries trying to not to lose so much money in helping Ukraine, and using the assets that are frozen from the Russian Central Bank in about $210 billion, which they think they are going to cover about 70% of the budget they need for Ukraine in 2026, 2027. So this is a very important step for one side. From the other side, most of these frozen assets, they are in a body called Euroclear in Belgium, and it's about 180 or 185 billion dollars, huge sum. And the Belgium thinks, fear that in some way the Russians are going to retaliate, or even to sue them in huge legal suits around the world, and they can cause a lot of damage. And let's not forget that with all the goodwill of Europe helping Ukraine all these years, they continue buying even less, but buying amounts of fuel and gas from Russia. So how are they going to cope with all the problems, and the legal problems are going to be from defrosing this money and giving it to Ukraine? This is a very important step, and let's see how Russians are going to answer to this. because it's a huge money, indeed.
Yes, and how can this commission ensure fairness and credibility when assessing individual claims? Especially, we know that there are more than 80,000 claims, especially given the vast number of victims and scale of destruction across Ukraine.
Yes, but from the legal point of view, it's a big difference between confiscating a yacht from a rich man that he has contravened several international laws and he can be confiscated, than confiscating from the central Russian bank. I mean, it can be seen from the other side like a kind of a war step. And let's see what's going to happen with this. I think they are not going to completely defrost and give to the Ukrainians. They are going to do something in the middle, and because they have to cope also with the suits, the legal suit that can be from this step. So one thing is what they say publicly, I mean, not the European Union and European countries alone, and the other part is what is going to respond each one of the European countries. And you have some of them that are very a big skepticism about this, because like Hungary or Slovakia or even Romania can be against this, and this is going to open a big discussion inside Europe itself.
And what role should international institutions like World Bank, European Union play in coordinating reparations with long-term reconstruction, also economic recovery efforts for Ukraine?
I think it's a big challenge, because if they were coordinated with the US, things will go smoothly. But now they are not coordinated with the US. They are opposing each other in the way they have to cope with this problem called the Russian-Ukrainian war. Because in the best of scenarios, if it's going to be a ceasefire, Ukraine is going to stay without about 20% of their territory. That's what everybody thinks. It's not what is fact now, but it's what they are talking about. And the rest of the 80%, they are going to try to enter inside the European Union. I'm not talking about NATO. I'm talking about a political reunion with all as a member of the European Union. And then everything will be escalonated. Everything will be in a schedule that will take maybe 5, 6, 7 years, but not all the sum together and not everything now.
Right. So, Matti, lastly, how do you think how aligned are Ukraine and Russia with the proposed US ceasefire deal?
Well, if you're talking about the possibility of a ceasefire, it's not different from what we talked some days ago. There is a big problem, because when Russia is feeling that this is going forward and taking more and more territories, it's not backed by Trump, but Trump is all the time giving them more and more time to think on how to do it and how to get to a ceasefire. I think if it is going to be maybe a public declaration from the side of Zelensky that I accept everything that said Trump, let's see today, this is going to put maybe in a corner both sides, Trump and the Russians. But until Zelensky continued to say that it's not acceptable this or that, it's a good excuse for both sides to continue in the status quo. So unfortunately for the Ukrainians, if they are not going to give up in several points before they sit with the Russians, this is not going to happen in this moment.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Matti Zweig for joining us today as a geopolitical expert from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much. Now we move on to US. A homicide investigation is underway in Los Angeles after filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle Singer Reiner were found dead at their Brentwood home. Their 32-year-old son, Nick Reiner, has been now arrested and is being held on suspicion of murder with no bail set. The couple were discovered with multiple stab wounds after emergency services were called to the residence on Sunday afternoon for a reported medical emergency. Both victims were pronounced dead at the scene by the paramedics. Nick Rayner was then taken into custody several hours later, and the case is expected to be presented to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, where a decision on whether charges will be filed is due. No motive has been publicly identified. Investigators have said that the probe remains ongoing. The deaths have drawn widespread attention because of Rob Rayner's prominent career in film and television spanning several decades. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Matthew Wadham. He's an American journalist and author, joins us live from Washington. Thank you very much, Mr. Wadham, for staying with us. Now, looking at this director who's been stabbed and who's been stabbed to death, how do you remember Rob Rayner, and what legacy does he leave behind?
Well, as an artistic figure, Rob Reiner leaves behind a huge legacy. He was not only a very convincing character actor, but an incredibly accomplished film director, responsible for such pieces as The Princess Bride and Stand By Me and When Harry Met Sally. I'd say there's hardly an American alive today who hasn't been affected by who isn't familiar with Rob Reiner's work or hasn't been affected by it. You know, a lot of people can quote scenes and dialogue from his movies by heart, and you know, he's a very it was a very important figure and a really skilled and accomplished movie director. So he leaves behind a vast legacy. You know, he got his start with that series, I guess it was in the 1970s, All in the Family, starring Carol O'Connor as Archie Bunker, and he was the son-in-law, Joey Stivic, who Archie Bunker called Meathead. And so, you know, that he was an iconic figure. The two didn't get along in the show, and that is how America was first introduced to Rob Reiner, and that was a very, you know, a heartwarming show that was beloved by American audiences. So, you know, Rob Reiner leaves behind a vast legacy, and he will not be forgotten for a long time to come.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Matthew Wadham for joining us and sharing that insight all the way from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has said that the fight against fentanyl should focus on root causes of the crisis, as she criticized a new U.S. classification of the deadly drug as a weapon of mass destruction. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that he was placing fentanyl in the same category as nuclear and chemical weapons as he ramps up his campaign against drug cartels in Latin America. The fentanyl classification ties in with the Trump administration's campaign against alleged narco-terrorists, which has included a military campaign targeting alleged drug smuggling boats. According to experts, the vessels are thought to be transporting cocaine rather than far deadlier fentanyl, which is primarily smuggled into the United States from Mexico rather than by boat from Colombia or Venezuela. Now we move on to France. Violence during protests over a livestock cull linked to lumpy skin disease has been blamed on far-left activists by French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu. According to the reports, it has been stated that a small group of around 40 to 50 extremists was involved in the unrest and was reported to be armed with Molotov cocktails and other weapons. The violence was said to have occurred alongside demonstrations that also included farmers, veterinarians, and other protesters. It was stressed that farmers were not responsible for the violent acts and were described as having a legitimate democratic right to challenge government's decisions affecting their livelihoods. A warning was issued by the government that confusion between extremist activists and farmers is dangerous and undermines legitimate protest. The violence was called out as unacceptable and was said to require clear and unequivocal condemnation by political groups, including La France Insoumise. Let's listen into what Le Cornu has shared.
Ces images ont pu choquer tout simplement parce qu'elles étaient choquantes et qu'un amalgame est en train d'être fait entre les éleveurs de France et 40 à 50 militants de l'ultra-gauche qui sont venus s'immiscer au milieu des éleveurs, des vétérinaires, des manifestants avec des cocktails Molotov et des armes par destination. Et que, de fait, entretenir cette confusion entre les éleveurs qui peuvent légitimement et démocratiquement contester les décisions qui sont prises, mais qui n'ont rien à voir avec ces militants de l'ultra-gauche que vous devez dénoncer, mesdames et messieurs, députés de la France insoumise. Il n'y a pas de place pour cette violence.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.